Hi, it's Nikki Dore. One of my friends was talking to me about getting these little kind of bits of information about a particular person who is known they know that person from a distance, but there is kind of no possibility of them getting together, but they feel very drawn to that person. Now I've seen this quite a lot, and that person can be a celebrity, it can be somebody that you kind of know from afar, but it's someone usually that you don't have a direct connection with, and you probably won't have a direct connection with, and you kind of wonder why, because it's a bit weird. And it's not a crush as such, you're not crushing on that person in particular, but it's like they pop up all the time, or there's certain similarities that you find that keep coming up, and every time they come up it kind of raises questions to you. Now, what I kind of say about these connections, and I'm talking more in a kind of partnership vibe, like you find whether it's the opposite sex or the same sex, you kind of look at them as a kind of, it's interesting, you feel really drawn to them, but you don't really know why, but also you feel a little bit crazy because they aren't, you're never really going to meet them, and you're like, well, it's not a crush because I don't hugely fancy them, but they keep popping up. Information feels relevant to that. Now, one thing that I often find, and one of the reasons why my company is called Daimon Mediation, is because the daemon is a form of a muse, and when you're going into certain significant relationships, it's often the way that Spirit, the universe, God, your guides get you prepared for what's coming up, especially if you've had perhaps traumatic relationships in the past, or perhaps there's, this is significant, but if they turned up now, you wouldn't accept them. They tend to send a daemon, a muse. So usually muse is used for women and daemon is used for men. So they send up to you this kind of muse, which helps you, because what happens is it starts popping up and you start going, okay, this is interesting, I don't know why, perhaps I don't really fancy them much, or I don't know why I'm feeling drawn to them. So you start delving into their lives a little bit. It sounds a little bit weird, but you start picking up, and what at that point it helps you is to kind of understand what about their lives that actually is interesting to you. But also it can help you with, especially if you're being prepared for relationships, it can raise the things that you need to work out. Before you meet them. So a good example is perhaps they're at a, so the person that I was speaking to was saying that the person that they're kind of drawn to is kind of, they're not a celebrity, but they're actually they're very visible in their lives. They have a certain status, and the person in question is not interested in being that visible and being that kind of out there in that kind of I don't know if it's social media, but media part. Now, as soon as she said that, I kind of felt that actually she's been drawn to look at the possibility. And sure enough, she was telling me that actually she had been told years ago that she's likely to end up with a partner that is kind of famous within that sphere. Now, the reason why I say this is because it doesn't mean that it's that particular person, but something about that person's situation. And here you're talking about, a status. Can be that you're being prepped to think about how you feel about it, and raising those questions. And especially if you're a very fixed sign, you can, if you don't like surprises, then what you can do, if that came up to you straight away, the first thing to do is to reject it. So this is kind of a way that kind of Spirit get you used to the idea of it. And it doesn't mean that it's an idea of whatever that is, so you can actually work on that blockage, work on that trigger. And so when someone does turn up that is for you, you would have had to, you've worked out some bits and pieces. Now this can relate to children, this can relate to status, this can relate to moving away, it can relate to, there's all these different subjects. It can relate to publicity, it can relate to kind of anything that you don't really feel connected to, but you've probably been told that is the type of person that you would end up with. And if you go and use astrology, then you would probably have seen that in your chart, that actually, because it does tell you quite a lot about your partnerships in your chart. It's kind of a way of getting you used to it, and if it's significant, you can feel it up to a year in advance. Yeah, and it kind of feels a little bit weird and obsessive at the beginning, because you're kind of like, why? So you end up kind of Googling everything, and then and then as it goes on, you start knowing stuff about that person because it feels connected, and you start knowing stuff about that person before it comes out. So it kind of reaffirms this connection. But you feel a little bit crazy because this connection could be, it's not tangible and it's not real, but it's actually preparing you for something else. So it's kind of, one of my friends would call it the fantasy lover, fantasy partner, which gets you ready for the real partner that comes through, and it helps you answer some of those questions which perhaps you wouldn't have been so ready to answer. Another, perhaps a better analogy, maybe I'm not putting this as succinctly as I should, a better analogy is if you're in a couple and you're proposed to and you don't expect to be proposed to, and you haven't talked about it and you haven't expected it, a lot of people actually would struggle with that situation because they haven't been prepped for it, they haven't, and it comes as a shock. And sometimes how we deal with shocks or surprises is to go the opposite direction and run away from it because we haven't thought about it, we haven't come round to what is our ideal of it. So you often find that those shock things don't always go very well for the person that he's proposing to or her proposing to. But when you actually look at, usually what happens is couples know that they're going to, that's the next stage, there's a certain amount of expectation, they've had a certain level of conversation about it. So when it comes along, it's not completely out of the kind of ether. They actually do, there is somewhere where they've kind of thought about it. And the problem is we react often badly to things that are completely new and alien to us, especially, as I say, fixed signs. And I say that as a fixed sign, a very fixed sign chart person. It doesn't mean you are kept to your chart, but I just want to make it kind of clear that a lot of that comes from there. Or you've had issues in the past, traumas in the past, where surprises have been quite damaging, or you've got abandonment issues, all of these things that make kind of suddenly having these things happen overwhelming. You will often be prepped for it beforehand, and the more aware you are and the more that you're connecting to yourself and your guides, and I kind of want to say spiritual aware, but I think that's got connotations that are a bit weird, but as more that you're expanding and growing, then the more likely that you're going to get this kind of guidance, so that you can, when it comes up, you're not going to kind of freak out and run. You've kind of worked out a lot of those questions, and some of them can be the fact that you need to change parts of your life to be prepared for that person and that relationship. And I'm not saying that you change your life for that person, but you change your life because that's where it should be going. That's one of your relationship needs. I've kind of probably gone around about the houses a little bit with this, but I do love doing Daimon work and muse work, so perhaps I'll do some more videos going into depth in how that connection works and how that they do prepare you for the next significant relationship, how you can work with it, how you can actually kind of what a Daimon is and what a muse is, because those are lots of questions that I realise I haven't really explored in this series. But anyway, if you're interested in that side and talking about kind of the mystical connection in relationships and how they build from not just talking about your guys, but from future partners, coming in and how your guides help you, how your daemons help you and your muses, then let me know in the comments and I'll do more videos like this. Please subscribe if you like the channel, or you like me waving my crystal ball about. Feel free to come and join me on Twitter as well, which is Daimon_mediator. Have a great day.